There was nothing special about the town where he grew up. No famous landmarks. No big companies. Just rows of old houses. A few shops that had seen better days. And people who worked hard just to get by. It was the kind of place where dreams felt like a luxury that only rich people could afford. He was 17 when everything changed. Not in some dramatic way with fireworks and music playing in the background. No, it happened quietly. In his small bedroom. On a phone with a cracked screen that he had bought secondhand for almost nothing. He found chess by accident. He was just scrolling through YouTube one night, bored and tired after a long day, when a video popped up. It showed two men sitting across from each other, moving pieces on a board, and a voice was explaining why each move mattered. He didn't know why, but he couldn't look away. There was something beautiful about it. Something that made his brain wake up in a way it never had before. That night, he watched chess videos for 4 hours straight. He didn't even realize how much time had passed until he saw the sun coming up through his window. From that moment, he was hooked. But here's the thing about his life. His family didn't have money for chess coaches. They didn't have money for fancy chess books or tournament fees or any of that stuff. His father worked at a small factory, coming home every evening with tired eyes and aching hands. His mother cleaned houses for other families, sometimes working 12-hour days just to make ends meet. They loved him. There was no doubt about that. But they couldn't give him what they didn't have, so he taught himself. Every single night, after finishing his homework and helping around the house, he would sit on his bed with that cracked phone and watch YouTube videos about chess. He learned the names of the pieces first. Then, he learned how they moved. Then he started understanding openings, middle game strategies, and endgame techniques. Words like Sicilian defense and King's Indian attack became part of his vocabulary. He didn't have a chessboard at first. He couldn't afford one. So he drew one on a piece of cardboard and made pieces out of bottle caps. He marked them with a pen to show which piece was which. It looked ridiculous, honestly. But it worked. He would watch a video, pause it, and then try to copy the position on his homemade board. Over and over again, until his eyes hurt and his back ached from hunching over. His parents didn't understand what he was doing. They saw him staring at his phone for hours, and they worried. His father once asked him if he was wasting his time on silly games. He tried to explain that chess was different, that it was a real sport, with world championships and professional players. But his father just shook his head and walked away. It hurt. It really did. But he didn't stop. School was no better. When his classmates found out about his new obsession, they thought it was the funniest thing in the world. Chess? Seriously? This wasn't the movies. This was real life. And in real life, kids from their town didn't become chess champions. They became mechanics, factory workers, or if they were lucky, maybe they got a government job somewhere. One day, in the school cafeteria, a group of boys sat down next to him and started asking questions. At first, he thought they were genuinely curious. But then he realized they were just setting him up for a joke. "So you think you're going to be a grandmaster or something?" one of them asked, grinning. "I just like playing," he said quietly, staring at his food. "Playing on YouTube?" Another one laughed. "Bro, that's not real training. You need coaches. You need to go to academies. You need money. You think watching videos is going to make you a champion? That's like watching cooking shows and thinking you're a chef." They all laughed. Loud, cruel laughter that echoed in his ears long after they walked away. He wanted to say something back. He wanted to tell them that they were wrong, that hard work could beat money, that passion could beat privilege. But the words got stuck in his throat. So he just sat there, feeling small and stupid, and wondering if maybe they were right. That night, he almost quit. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything they had said. Maybe he was being foolish. Maybe this was all just a waste of time. Maybe he should focus on something more realistic. Something that could actually help his family. He picked up his phone, ready to delete all the chess videos from his watch history. His thumb hovered over the screen for a long moment, but then he thought about how he felt when he played. The way his mind came alive. The way everything else disappeared, and it was just him and the board. He had never felt that way about anything else in his life. Not school, not sports, nothing. Could he really give that up just because some kids laughed at him? He put the phone down and went to sleep. The next morning, he woke up early and watched 2 videos before school. A few months later, he heard about a chess club in a nearby town. It was about an hour away by bus, but they offered free membership to students. His heart raced with excitement. Finally, a chance to play against real people. A chance to test everything he had learned. He took the bus one Saturday morning, nervous and excited at the same time. The club was in an old building with dusty windows and creaky floors. Inside, there were about 15 people, mostly older men with serious faces, sitting at tables with proper chessboards and proper pieces. It was the first time he had ever seen a real chess set up close. He walked up to the man at the front desk and asked about joining. The man looked him up and down, taking in his cheap clothes and worn-out shoes. "Do you have any formal training?" the man asked. "No, sir. I learned from YouTube." The man's eyebrows went up. "YouTube?" "Yes, sir." There was a long pause. The man exchanged looks with some of the other members. A few of them chuckled quietly. "Son, this club is for serious players. We have members who have trained under national-level coaches. We have people who have competed in state championships. We can't just let anyone walk in here because they watched some videos online." He felt his face getting hot. "But I've been studying for months. I know I'm not the best yet, but if you just give me a chance to play one game, I can show you that I'm serious." The man sighed like he was dealing with a child who didn't understand how the world worked. "Look, I'm sure you're a nice kid, but we have standards here. Come back when you have some real experience. Maybe take some lessons first." He wanted to argue. He wanted to demand that they give him a chance. But something in the man's eyes told him it wouldn't matter. The decision had already been made the moment he walked through the door looking the way he did. He took the bus home in silence, watching the trees pass by outside the window. His reflection stared back at him in the glass, and he hated how defeated he looked. But somewhere deep inside, underneath all the hurt and embarrassment, a small fire was starting to burn. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something else. Something more powerful. It was determination. They wanted him to have real experience? Fine. They wanted him to prove himself? Fine. He would do exactly that. And one day, he would walk into places like that club, and no one would ever look at him like he didn't belong again. He didn't know how long it would take. He didn't know how hard it would be. But he knew one thing for certain. He was not going to quit. After finishing school, he needed to find work. There was no question about it. His family needed the money, and sitting around dreaming about chess wasn't going to pay the bills. So when his uncle offered him a job at his small auto repair shop, he said yes without thinking twice. The work was hard. He spent his days covered in grease and oil, crawling under cars, handing tools to his uncle, and learning how to fix engines that had seen better days. His hands, which had once been soft, became rough and calloused. His back ached from bending over car parts for hours. By the time evening came, he was so tired that sometimes he could barely keep his eyes open. But every single night, no matter how exhausted he was, he would wash the grease off his hands, eat whatever dinner his mother had prepared, and then disappear into his room. And there, in that small space with peeling paint on the walls, he would become someone else. He would become a student of the game. His routine was the same every night. He would sit on his bed, plug in his phone because the battery was always dying, and open YouTube. Then he would study, not casually, not like someone watching videos for fun. He studied like his life depended on it. He analyzed games played by grandmasters, pausing every few seconds to understand why they made certain moves. He watched tutorials on openings, writing down notes in a cheap notebook he had bought from a street vendor. He solved tactical puzzles until his brain felt like it was going to explode. Some nights, he studied for 3 hours. Other nights, it was 5 or 6. There were times when he would look at the clock and realize it was 3 in the morning, and he had to wake up in 4 hours for work, but he didn't care. Sleep could wait. This couldn't. He also started playing online. There were websites where you could play against people from all over the world for free. He created an account with a random username and started challenging strangers. At first, he lost constantly. It wasn't even close. Players would crush him in 20 moves. Sometimes less. He would stare at the screen, trying to figure out where he went wrong, feeling that familiar sting of failure, but he didn't let it break him. Every loss was a lesson. Every defeat was a chance to learn something new. He would take his lost games and analyze them move by move, comparing them to what the YouTube tutorials had taught him. Slowly, very slowly, he started to improve. The first time he won a game against a player with a higher rating than him, he almost shouted out loud. He had to cover his mouth with his hand to stop himself, because it was 2 a.m. and his parents were sleeping in the next room. But inside, his heart was racing. It was proof. Proof that all those hours were actually leading somewhere. Nobody knew about this double life he was living. At the shop, he was just the quiet kid who did his work and didn't complain. His coworkers would talk about football matches, local gossip, and weekend plans. He would listen and nod, but his mind was always somewhere else. He would be thinking about a game he had played the night before, or a puzzle he couldn't solve, or a new opening he wanted to try. One afternoon, that secret life almost came crashing into the open. He had left his notebook on a table during lunch break. It was the notebook where he wrote all his chess notes, filled with diagrams and strategies, and move sequences. He had stepped away for just a few minutes to wash his hands, and when he came back, one of his co-workers was holding it. "What's this?" the man asked, flipping through the pages with a confused look on his face. He felt his stomach drop. "It's nothing, just some personal stuff," but the man didn't give it back. Instead, he called over the other workers. "Hey, come look at this. Our boy here is studying chess." Chess. Like those old men in the park, within seconds, everyone in the shop was gathered around, passing the notebook from hand to hand, laughing at the diagrams he had drawn so carefully. "What is this, some kind of secret code?" One of them joked. "He thinks he's going to be a genius or something," another one said. "YouTube University," someone else added. And they all burst out laughing. Professor Nobody over here, teaching himself from videos, he stood there, feeling his face burn with embarrassment. He wanted to grab the notebook and run. He wanted to yell at them, to tell them they had no right to touch his things. But he didn't. He just stood there, silent, waiting for it to be over. Finally, his uncle walked in and told everyone to get back to work. The notebook was tossed onto the table, and the men wandered off. Still chuckling to themselves, his uncle looked at him for a long moment. "Chess, huh?" He nodded, not trusting himself to speak. His uncle sighed. "Look, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your free time. But don't let this stuff distract you from real work. Dreams are nice, but they don't put food on the table." That night, he sat in his room and stared at the notebook. The pages were a little wrinkled now from being passed around. Some of the ink had smudged, but the words were still there. The diagrams were still there. All those hours of work were still there. He thought about what his uncle had said. Dreams don't put food on the table. It was true, in a way. He couldn't argue with that. But there was something his uncle didn't understand. Something that nobody seemed to understand. This wasn't just a dream. This was the only thing that made him feel alive. When he was playing chess, he wasn't the poor kid from the small town. He wasn't the mechanic's helper covered in grease. He was someone else entirely. Someone with a sharp mind and endless possibilities. Someone who could compete with people from anywhere in the world and hold his own. How could he give that up? How could anyone expect him to just let that go? He picked up the notebook and smoothed out the wrinkled pages. Then he opened his phone and started studying again. The months turned into years. He kept working at the shop during the day. He kept studying at night. His online rating climbed higher and higher. He started beating players who had been playing for decades. He started recognizing patterns instantly, seeing 5 or 6 moves ahead without even trying. But still, nobody knew. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't brag. He didn't post about it on social media. He just kept grinding, alone in his room, night after night after night. Sometimes he wondered if it would ever lead anywhere. Sometimes, late at night when his eyes were burning and his body was begging for sleep, he would ask himself what the point of all this was. He wasn't part of any club. He didn't have a coach. He had never played in a real tournament. Maybe he was just fooling himself. Maybe all those people who laughed at him were right. But then he would remember the feeling he got when he won a difficult game. That rush of joy and pride that nothing else in his life could give him. And he would tell himself to keep going. Just one more video. Just one more game. Just one more night. He didn't know if he would ever get a chance to prove himself to the world. He didn't know if anyone would ever take him seriously. But he knew one thing for certain. When that chance came, if it ever came, he would be ready. He would be more than ready. And all those people who laughed and mocked and doubted, they would have no idea what hit them. He was 21 years old when he finally got his chance. It happened on a random Tuesday evening. He was lying on his bed after work, scrolling through chess forums on his phone like he always did, when he saw a post that made him sit up straight. A regional chess tournament was being held in a city about 3 hours away. The entry fee was low, and it was open to anyone who wanted to participate. No club membership required. No formal training needed. Just show up and play. His heart started beating faster. This was it. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for all these years. A real tournament. Real opponents. Real chessboards. A chance to finally test himself against people in person. Not just usernames on a screen. But almost immediately, the doubts came rushing in. What if he wasn't ready? What if all those online wins meant nothing in a real competition? What if he traveled all that way, spent money he couldn't really afford, and ended up embarrassing himself in front of everyone? He put the phone down and stared at the ceiling. The fear was real. He could feel it sitting heavy in his chest. For a long moment, he seriously considered just ignoring the post and going on with his life. It was safer that way. No risk of failure. No risk of humiliation. But then another thought crept into his mind. What was the point of all those years of studying if he never even tried? What was the point of all those sleepless nights, all those sacrifices, all that pain, if he was too scared to take a single chance? He picked up the phone again and registered for the tournament before he could change his mind. The next few weeks were intense. He studied harder than ever, focusing on the weaknesses he knew he still had. He played online games until his vision blurred, analyzing every single one afterward. He barely slept. He barely ate properly. His uncle noticed something was different and asked if he was feeling okay. He just nodded and said everything was fine. The day of the tournament arrived. He woke up before sunrise, put on his only dress shirt, which was slightly wrinkled because he didn't own an iron, and took a bus to the city. 3 hours of watching the world pass by outside the window, his leg bouncing nervously the entire time. When he finally arrived at the venue, his jaw almost dropped. It was a large hall with high ceilings and bright lights. There were dozens of tables set up in neat rows, each one with a proper chessboard, a clock, and 2 chairs. People were everywhere, talking in small groups, warming up with practice games, looking confident and comfortable like they belonged there. He looked down at himself, his wrinkled shirt, his old shoes that were starting to fall apart, the small bag he carried with nothing inside except a bottle of water and his notebook. He didn't look like he belonged there at all. For a moment, he thought about turning around and leaving. Nobody knew him here. Nobody would notice if he just disappeared. He could go home, tell no one about this, and pretend it never happened. But his feet didn't move toward the exit. Instead, almost without thinking, he walked toward the registration desk and gave his name. The woman at the desk checked her list and handed him a small card with a number on it. "You're at table 14 for the first round," she said. "Good luck, good luck." He was going to need a lot more than luck. He found table 14 and sat down. His opponent arrived a few minutes later. An older man with gray hair and a calm expression. The man looked at him with a hint of curiosity but said nothing. They shook hands, and the game began. The first few moves were tense. His hands were trembling slightly as he moved the pieces. He could feel his heart pounding in his ears. But as the game went on, something strange happened. The nerves started to fade. The noise of the room started to disappear. It was just him and the board, exactly like it had been all those nights in his bedroom. He won that first game. It wasn't easy, but he won. The second game was harder. His opponent was younger, faster, more aggressive. But he stayed calm, found the right moves, and won again. By the third round, people were starting to notice. He could see them glancing at his table, whispering to each other. Who was this unknown player winning game after game? Where did he come from? Which academy trained him? He didn't pay attention to any of it. He just kept playing. The fourth round. Another win. The fifth round. Another win. By the time the semifinals came around, he was the talk of the entire tournament. Some people were impressed. Others were skeptical, saying he must be cheating somehow, or that his opponents had just been weak. His semi-final opponent was a young man who had trained under one of the best coaches in the country. The man walked up to the table with a confident smile, like he already knew he was going to win. They shook hands, and the game started. It was the most difficult game he had ever played. Every move felt like a battle. Every decision carried enormous weight. The clock was ticking, the pressure was crushing, and at several points, he was sure he was going to lose. But he didn't lose. He found moves he didn't even know he was capable of finding. He spotted a tactical combination that turned the entire game around. And when he finally delivered checkmate, the confident smile on his opponent's face was gone, replaced by pure shock. He was in the finals. The final match was against a player who had won this tournament 3 times before. A man with years of professional experience, a wall full of trophies, and the respect of everyone in the chess community. On paper, it shouldn't have even been close. They played for over 2 hours. It was brutal, exhausting, and beautiful all at the same time. The entire room gathered around to watch. Nobody made a sound. In the end, he lost. One single mistake in the endgame, one move he wished he could take back, and it was over. His opponent shook his hand and said, "Good game." He nodded, unable to speak, feeling a strange mix of disappointment and pride swirling inside him. He had lost. But he had also announced himself to the world. After the tournament, people crowded around him. Journalists, other players, curious spectators. Everyone wanted to know his story. Where did he train? Who was his coach? How had he gotten so good without anyone ever hearing of him? When he told them the truth, that he had learned everything from YouTube videos, that he had never had a coach or a club, that he had practiced on a cardboard chessboard with bottle cap pieces, some of them laughed. They thought he was joking. But when they realized he was serious, the laughter stopped. His story spread quickly. Chess websites wrote articles about him. People shared his games online with comments like, "Is this really possible?" And the YouTube kid is for real. Some praised him as an inspiration. Others said it was a fluke, that he had gotten lucky, that he would never make it any further. He read some of those comments on the bus ride home. The negative ones stung a little, he couldn't deny that. But the positive ones made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. He had come so close. One move away from winning the whole thing. One tiny mistake separating him from the trophy. It would have been easy to focus on that, to drown in regret, to wonder what could have been, but that wasn't how he saw it. He saw a gap. A gap between where he was and where he needed to be. And gaps could be closed. Gaps could be conquered. It would take more work, more study, more sacrifice. But he had been doing that his whole life. What was a little more? He leaned his head against the bus window and smiled for the first time in a long time. The world had finally seen him, and this was only the beginning. The weeks after that tournament changed everything. His story had spread further than he ever imagined. Chess websites kept writing about him. People shared his games on social media. Some called him an inspiration. Others called him a fraud who got lucky. But one thing was certain. People were talking about him. People knew his name now. Then, one morning, he received an email that he had to read 3 times before he believed it was real. A small chess foundation had seen his story and wanted to offer him a sponsorship. It wasn't a huge amount of money, nothing that would make him rich. But it was enough. Enough to cover his basic expenses. Enough to allow him to stop working at the auto shop. Enough to let him train full-time. He sat on his bed, staring at the screen, his hands shaking. This was the moment he had dreamed about for years. Someone out there believed in him. Someone was willing to take a chance on a kid who learned chess from YouTube videos in a tiny bedroom. He called his parents into the room and showed them the email. His mother covered her mouth with her hand, tears forming in her eyes. His father read it slowly, then looked at his son with an expression he had never seen before. It wasn't doubt. It wasn't disappointment. It was something that looked almost like pride. "So what are you going to do?" his father asked quietly. He took a deep breath. "I'm going to take it. I'm going to see how far I can go." His father nodded slowly. "Then go. And don't look back." That conversation meant more to him than any trophy ever could. He quit his job at the shop the next week. His uncle wasn't happy about it, but he understood. "Just don't come crying to me when this chess thing doesn't work out," his uncle said, half joking, half serious. He promised he wouldn't. For the next 2 years, his life became nothing but chess. He woke up every morning and studied for hours. He played against strong opponents online, sometimes 50 games a week. He traveled to small tournaments whenever he could afford it, gaining experience and sharpening his skills. He still used YouTube as his main teacher, but now he also studied books, analyzed games from old champions, and watched live broadcasts of top-level matches. It wasn't easy. There were days when he felt stuck, like he wasn't improving no matter how hard he tried. There were nights when he lay awake wondering if he had made the right choice. The sponsorship money was barely enough to survive on. He lived in a tiny rented room, ate cheap food, and owned almost nothing. Sometimes he missed the simplicity of his old life, when chess was just a hobby and not his entire existence. But he kept going. He had come too far to stop now. At 23 years old, something incredible happened. After a series of strong performances in national tournaments, he earned enough ranking points to qualify for the World Chess Championship, the biggest stage in the sport, the place where legends were made and dreams came true. When he saw his name on the official list of qualifiers, he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So he did both. The tournament was held in a grand hall in a European city he had only seen in pictures before. When he arrived, he felt like he had stepped into another world. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, cameras were everywhere, journalists walked around with microphones, interviewing players who had been famous for decades. The air itself felt different, heavier somehow, filled with history and pressure. He was the only player there without a professional coach standing beside him. He was the only one who had never trained at an elite academy. When other competitors looked at him, he could see the question in their eyes. Who is this guy? How did he get here? The media loved his story. They called him the ultimate underdog. The self-taught mechanic taking on grandmasters who had been groomed for this moment since childhood. It made for great headlines, but headlines didn't win chess games. The tournament format was brutal. 7 rounds against the best players on the planet. One bad game could end everything. And at first, it looked like everything was going to end very quickly. He lost his first game. A painful defeat against a former world champion who dismantled his opening strategy like it was child's play. He sat at the board after it was over, staring at the pieces, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes on him. The second game was even worse. He made a critical blunder in the middle game, the kind of mistake he hadn't made in years. His opponent pounced on it immediately, and within 10 moves, it was over. 2 losses, 0 wins. His dream was slipping away. That night, he didn't sleep at all. He lay in his hotel bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of his own heartbeat. The voices in his head were loud and cruel. You don't belong here. You're not good enough. Everyone was right about you. This was all a mistake. He picked up his phone and looked at social media. It was full of posts about him, but not the kind he wanted to see. People were saying the fairy tale was over. Critics who had doubted him from the beginning were celebrating. "I told you so," they wrote. YouTube chess doesn't work at the highest level. He almost broke that night. He almost called the airline to book an early flight home. What was the point of staying? He had already embarrassed himself in front of the entire world. Why drag it out any longer? But somewhere around 4 in the morning, something shifted inside him. He thought about his journey. The cracked phone, the bottle-cap chess pieces, the coworkers who laughed at him, the chess club that rejected him. All those years of grinding alone in the dark. He hadn't come this far to give up after 2 bad games. He hadn't sacrificed everything just to run away when things got hard. He got out of bed, splashed cold water on his face, and opened his laptop. He spent the rest of the night analyzing his losses, finding where he went wrong, and preparing for the next round. By the time the sun came up, his eyes were red and exhausted. But his mind was clear. He was not done yet. The third game was different. He played with a calm intensity that surprised everyone, including himself. His moves were sharp, creative, fearless. His opponent, a highly ranked grandmaster, looked confused by the end. When the final checkmate landed, the room fell silent for a moment before a few people started clapping. One win. But he needed more. The fourth game, another win. The fifth game, another win. He was playing the best chess of his entire life, finding combinations that weren't in any textbook, making decisions that left commentators speechless. The same people who had written him off were now scrambling to explain what was happening. By the 6th round, he had climbed back into contention. The final round would decide everything. And his opponent? The reigning world champion. The man who had dominated the chess world for years, a genius who had been called unbeatable. The game lasted over 3 hours. Every move felt like a lifetime. The tension in the room was so thick you could almost touch it. Thousands of people watched online. Millions followed the updates. The whole world was holding its breath. He didn't play safe. He couldn't afford to. He played aggressive, bold, attacking chess. The kind of chess that came from years of studying alone, from developing his own style, from refusing to play by anyone else's rules. And then, in the final moments of the game, he saw it. A sequence of moves that would lead to checkmate in 7. His heart nearly stopped. He double-checked, triple-checked, making sure it was real. It was real. He made the moves. One by one. Calm and steady. His opponent stared at the board, searching for an escape that didn't exist. And then, slowly, the champion reached out and tipped over his king. The room erupted. People jumped out of their seats. Cameras flashed from every direction. Commentators shouted into their microphones. He just sat there, frozen, unable to move, unable to believe what had just happened. He had done it. The kid who learned chess from YouTube videos had just become the world champion. The moment the game ended, he didn't feel like a champion. He felt like a kid who had just woken up from a dream and wasn't sure if any of it was real. People rushed toward him. Cameras surrounded him from every angle. Journalists pushed microphones in his face, asking questions he couldn't even hear properly. His ears were ringing. His hands were still trembling. All he could do was sit there, staring at the board where his opponent's king lay on its side. He had won. He had actually won. Someone handed him a trophy. It was heavy and golden, and had his name engraved on it. His name. The name of a kid from a small town who used to practice on a cardboard chessboard with bottle cap pieces. The name that people had laughed at for years. That name was now etched into the history of chess forever. They asked him to give a speech. He stood up on shaky legs and walked to the microphone. The room was packed, hundreds of people staring at him, waiting for him to say something meaningful, something inspiring. He had never been good at public speaking. He had spent most of his life staying quiet, avoiding attention, hiding in the shadows, but not anymore. He cleared his throat and spoke slowly, carefully, from the heart. "I'm not supposed to be here," he said. That's what everyone told me. My whole life. People said I didn't have the right background, the right training, the right connections. They said you can't become a champion by watching YouTube videos in your bedroom. They said I was wasting my time. They said I should give up and focus on something realistic. He paused, looking out at the crowd, but I didn't listen. Not because I thought I was special. Not because I knew I would win. I didn't listen because chess was the only thing that made me feel alive, and I wasn't willing to let anyone take that away from me. The room was completely silent. Every eye was on him. To anyone out there who has a dream that other people don't understand, I want you to know something. You don't need permission to chase what you love. You don't need expensive schools or famous coaches or wealthy parents. All you need is the willingness to work harder than everyone else, and the courage to keep going when the world tells you to stop. He looked down at the trophy in his hands. This isn't just my victory. This belongs to every person who ever felt invisible. Every person who was told they weren't good enough. Every person who studied alone in the dark, hoping that someday, somehow, it would all be worth it. He took a breath. It's worth it. Trust me, it's worth it. When he finished, the room exploded with applause. People were standing, clapping, some of them wiping tears from their eyes. He didn't know what to do, so he just nodded and walked off the stage, still clutching the trophy like he was afraid someone would take it away. The next few days were a blur. Interviews, photo shoots, phone calls from people he had never met. His face was everywhere. News channels ran stories about him. Social media was flooded with posts celebrating the YouTube champion. Strangers sent him messages saying he had inspired them to chase their own dreams. But the messages that meant the most came from people he actually knew. His mother called him crying so hard she could barely speak. "I always believed in you," she kept saying. "Even when I didn't understand. I always believed." His father sent him a text message. Just 3 words. "I was wrong." Coming from his father, that meant more than any trophy ever could. His uncle from the auto shop called and laughed for 5 minutes straight. "I can't believe it," he said. "The kid who used to hand me wrenches is a world champion. I'm going to tell everyone I know. I'm going to say, I taught you everything." Even some of his old coworkers reached out. The same ones who had passed around his notebook and called him Professor Nobody. They weren't laughing anymore. They were congratulating him, telling him they always knew he had something special. He didn't believe them, but he thanked them anyway. There was no point in holding on to old anger. A few weeks after the tournament, he received a message that stopped him in his tracks. It was from the chess club that had rejected him years ago, the same club that told him he didn't have proper training foundations. They wanted to make him an honorary member. They wanted him to come speak to their students. He read the message several times, not sure how to feel. Part of him wanted to say no. Part of him wanted to remind them how they had treated him when he was just a scared teenager asking for a chance. But another part of him, a bigger part, realized something important. Revenge wasn't the point. Proving people wrong wasn't the point. The point was the game itself. The beautiful, endless, impossible game that had saved his life. He accepted the invitation. When he walked into that club, the same building with the dusty windows and creaky floors, everything felt different. The people who had once looked down on him now stood up to shake his hand. The man at the front desk, the same one who had turned him away, apologized with tears in his eyes. He didn't gloat. He didn't remind anyone of what they had said. He just smiled and told them it was okay. Because it was. He had made it despite everything. Nothing they had done could hurt him anymore. He spent the afternoon playing games with young students at the club. Kids who reminded him of himself. Kids with second-hand clothes and nervous eyes and dreams that felt too big for their small lives. He told them his story. The real version, with all the embarrassing parts and painful moments. He wanted them to know that champions weren't born. They were made, one hard day at a time. That visit gave him an idea. A few months later, he launched something he had been thinking about for a long time. A free online chess academy for kids who couldn't afford coaches or club memberships. Anyone could join, from anywhere in the world. No fees, no requirements, just a love for the game and a willingness to learn. He taught classes himself whenever he could. He recorded videos, explaining strategies and tactics, the same way he had learned years ago. He answered questions from students who reminded him so much of his younger self that sometimes it made his chest ache. The academy grew faster than he ever expected. Within a year, thousands of students had signed up from dozens of countries. Some of them started winning local tournaments. Some of them sent him messages saying he had changed their lives. Those messages meant more to him than the world title, because he remembered what it felt like to be alone. He remembered the cold nights studying on a cracked phone. He remembered the laughter, the rejection, the doubt. He remembered lying in bed wondering if any of it would ever matter. And now he had a chance to make sure no one else had to feel that alone. One evening, years after his big win, he sat in his small apartment watching one of his students play in an online tournament. The kid was from a village even smaller than his own hometown. No chess club, no coach, just a cheap laptop and a dream. The kid won the match with a beautiful checkmate that made him laugh out loud. He leaned back in his chair and smiled. The trophy from the World Championship sat on a shelf behind him, gathering a little dust. He didn't look at it much anymore. It wasn't the most important thing in the room. The most important thing was on the screen. A new generation of dreamers, proving that where you come from doesn't decide where you can go. He had been mocked, doubted, and rejected. He had almost quit more times than he could count. But he hadn't, and because he hadn't, neither would they.